Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Life of a Dev. And today, we're back on HackerRank.com, and I didn't see any comments, so we're just going to stick with Java. And if you can tell by the screen, we're doing the Java if-else statement. Now, an if-else statement is a pretty basic one, and it's laid out like the diagram on the screen. The giant black dot is your starting point, and then this one is your ending point. So you go into a decision, which is the symbol right here, labeled A. So if A is true, you can take the true branch. If it's false, you can take the false branch. Execute B if it's true, execute C if it's false, and then you're all done. Pretty simple. There's also an else if, which we will get into as we're doing the code for this one. So the task for this one is we'll get given an integer, which is noted as n, and then if it's odd, we print the word weird. If it's even in between the inclusive range of 2 to 5, which inclusive means that it includes 2 and it will include 5, we're going to print not weird. If it's between 6 and 20 inclusively, we're going to print weird. And if it's greater than 20, we're going to print not weird, even and greater than 20. And so, we're going to go down below and we're going to start filling in our code. So, there's a bit done for you already, and that checks to see if it's odd, because if it's odd, it's always weird. Now, what we have to do is check to see if n is between 2 and 5 inclusively. And so what I did here was I did the if statement, and then n, which is our number, if it's greater than or equal to 2, and that's what this means is and. It's also less than or equal to 5. So that means it'll trigger on 4, 3, everything in between. It'll be awesome. And that is going to be not weird. Now, for the fun part. After that one, we're going to use an else if statement. So this is basically saying like, if the first if isn't true, you're going to check this one next. And it'll go in the actual order you have it. Which will come to a fun point later that we shall talk about. Now, we're going to check to see if it's between 6 and 20. Again, just a basic check will be perfectly fine. That's going to be weird. And for the last one, it's kind of the else statement. So that what's different between this one is it's just else and then the brackets. And this is just the if all the other ifs fail, it's going to do this one. And that stands for if it's greater than 20. Which you could explicitly check for if you wanted to, but I'm not too worried about it. And so, one thing you could have done is you could have just done an if statement started from the top, and it could have been to check if n is greater than 20, and then you could have done the second one to check if n is greater than 5, and then the else could have been this little section, but we're not going to worry about that. So we're going to run the code to test it to make sure that it works, and it does. It passes our test cases. So then we're just going to submit the code and wait for it to process, and everything passed. So that was good. Now we're going to hop into the next problem. Next one we're going to do is the Java stdin and stdout2. And so this one, they're going to give us an integer, a double, and a string that we have to read in, and then we have to immediately print back out. And so if you go down, you can see that they actually have done this for you. Or they've done the printing for you, and you just have to read them in. And they've already read in the integer. And so we're going to read in the double, which we're going to call D. And all we're going to do is scan, and we're going to look for the next double. And that is going to fill in that value with the next double in line, which per the sample input is pi. And so the next one is for the string. Now, there's one thing to remember, is that there are new lines at the end of each line of the sample input. And this means that when you scan the next double, it finds the next double, and then the pointer to the file of the input is immediately after that. So right now, looking at the sample input, the cursor is right here. So if we try to do the scan next to get the next string, it's only going to pick up this first one. And so you want to scan the entire line. But if you do the scan.next line where we are now, you're just going to pick up the new line, and it's not going to return anything. which I will demonstrate down below. So if you were to do scan.next line, that would usually return the string, assuming that the cursor is in the right spot. But as you'll see by the test, it fails, and our string has no output but has a new line. So we're just going to do one simple fix for this. I'm just going to add in a scan.nextLine to basically set the cursor down at the beginning of the line of the string. Now when we run it, everything runs perfectly fine, and you can go ahead and just submit the code just like that. And then your challenge is solved. And so that kind of covered some of the stuff that we talked about the first video with the Java stdin and stdout2. It goes a little bit more in depth with the specific formatting. Okay, now this is the Java output formatting, which Java has a system.out.printf, which allows you to format your output however you want to. And there's a lot that you can do to format the output. So for this task, we're giving a string followed by an integer. And then each string will have a maximum of 10 alphabetic characters, and each integer will be in the inclusive range from 0 to 999. And it's always important to read these input formats because it can really depend on how, it can really change how you write your code. And so for the output, it's going to have to look like the sample output below. And we're given the sample input. And so it's already all read in for you, and they print out the lines of equal signs. So all we have to do is just create the actual output formatting. So we're going to do a system.out.printf. Now we're going to do this all in a string. Do %15s. I'm going to talk about this in just a second after I type it all in, as it'll be a lot easier to display it that way. And X. Okay, so what we did here was this first little section. Well, we'll start with the basic. So if you wanted to just output the string as it was, you do a %s, which signifies a placeholder for a string, and then the very first argument would have to be a string, which it is. We read it in right there. And what we do here is we basically say it's going to be 15 spaces long, and if there's nothing in that space to fill in, you're going to fill it in with empty space, which that's a placeholder for white space. And we do the same thing on the integer side, which the D stands for double, which will work for an integer, so that's perfectly fine. It's going to be 3 digits long at the most, and if there's ever not a space filled in, so like in Python up here, it's 50, you're going to add a 0 onto it. And if it was just 3 or something, it'd be 003, and that would be perfect. So let's run the code, and all the formatting rules can be found online. I will find the Java documents and link them down below if you want to take a look, but there is just a ton that you can do with this formatting. And then we'll get into that a little bit more in the next one too, just to kind of display its versatility. And so we passed the test cases when we ran the code. Now we're going to submit it once again, and with this website you'll gain points, you'll gain ranks, you can use the points to actually download the test cases if you want them. So you click on download, it'll say that you can for 5 Hackos, which are your points, and you can do that if you want to, but it's not necessary. And we're going to hop into the last one that we're going to do for the day, which is Java Loops number 1. And the task for this one is given an integer n, print its first 10 multiples, each multiple n times I, where 1 is between, or where I goes from 1 to 10, and then it should be printed on a new line in that form. And so as you can see, you're given your sample input, which is your n value, and then you can multiply it by the loop number that you're on, and then you're going to get the result. And so the way that I do this one is I personally use a for loop, and it's set up like so. So your first one is the declaration. So you do the for, and then you're going to use your iterator variable. So I used I, which is going to be equal to 1, and then I'm going to do while I, this is the stop clause pretty much. So when this is no longer true, the for loop will no longer run. So as long as I is less than or equal to 10, it'll run. And then the very last one is what to do with the variable afterwards. And the I++ means that it just adds 1 after it runs, or you could put them in front, which would mean add 1 before it's used. So your I would have to be 0, your I, yes, stuff like that. And now all we have to do is output it, which this is where versatility comes in, and it becomes a great thing. So as you can see, I'm not actually going to calculate what the result would be until I'm actually going to put it in. And this little thing right here is the new line character. So you have to make sure you add that in if you want a new line, because the system.out.printf doesn't add a new line like the system.out.println does. And so now we're going to print out the number that we scanned in first, the loop number that we are on, and then we're going to do n times I to get the actual result. I'm going to run the code real quick, and you see everything worked perfect, ran great. Also, if you really wanted to on all your programs, you could test against custom input. So I could put, say, a 5 in here, click run, it'll show you your input, and then it'll show you your output. Obviously there's nothing to compare verse, so you'd have to just check it yourself to make sure it's all good. That's also an opportunity for you. And you can upload your code as a file if you code it on your local machine instead of doing it in the built-in editor here, whatever you'd like to do. So now we're going to submit our code because everything looks to be working right. Compiles it, runs it, everything works, and we earned another 10 points. And so if you have any questions about today, make sure you put them in the comments down below, and I will happily answer any questions you have. And for the next video, we're going to do Java Loops 2, Java Data Types, Java End of File, and the Java Static Initializer block. And if you guys want to come out and check out these problems before I do them, or maybe try to solve them yourself, let me know. If you have any issues, also let me know with that, because I'd be happy to help you. So thank you guys for watching. Have a good night.